I will ask in a moment for a proposer and seconder in respect of either or both of those candidates. And then if anybody wishes to speak or ask questions, you can do so. If there is anybody who hasn't nominated themselves and put forward a pen portrait, it's going to be very difficult for your colleagues to vote or to choose between you and the other candidates. So what we would suggest is that if you do wish to stand, that you stand again next, that you stand next year rather than standing this year. So is there anybody who would like to nominate either of the two candidates? So Councillor Cunningham, I see you've indicated.
Thank you, Gareth. I would move the name of Councillor Dylan Rees as chair of this authority for this new administration. In my opinion, he will carry out the role to allow a smooth transition from the last administration to this one. And he is bilingual. He has chaired many large meetings and he has lots of experience. So I formally move the name of Dylan Rees.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, Nigel Smith.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd be more than happy to second Councillor Dylan as chair of the authority. He's worked well with the previous chair as vice chair, and it'll allow that continuity of leadership for the authority going forward.
Are there any other nominees?
Yes, I'd like to, Chair, I'd like to nominate Marion Bateman for the chair of the authority.
Thank you, Councillor Davis-Cook.
I've known Marion for many years and she's been in business, and then in retirement she became a Flintshire County Councillor and represented the Norfolk Ward. She's very dedicated in her role, and Marion became the chair of Flintshire County Council from 2019 to 21, which was obviously, she was in the role when COVID struck, and she stayed in post whilst the pandemic continued. With Marion being on the North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority since 2017, I feel that she has the experience and dedication to represent NWFRA at regional and national level. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis-Cook. Is there a seconder for that proposal? We just by way of explanation, we need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Beverly Parry-Jones, you have your hand up.
I'm happy to second Gareth, Councillor Bateman for this position.
Deal. Are there any other nominations? Well, as I said, if there are any other nominations, if we can ask you to postpone those to next year. Did anybody wish to speak or ask questions? Councillor Jeff Evans, you had indicated earlier.
It was only my intent to second Dylan Rees for the vice chair. I know him as an honest, trustworthy, positive individual, and I think he will carry out that role effectively and positively.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. So, did anybody wish to speak or ask any questions in relation to the two nominations? I'll take that as a no. Alwyn, would you be able to post the poll then, please?
Okay, 21 have voted, so I will end the poll and share the results.
86% in favour of Councillor Dylan Rees, 14% for Councillor Marion Bateman. Therefore, Councillor Dylan Rees, you are elected as chair. Congratulations. And I will hand the meeting to you.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, everybody, for the support. Thank you for voting for me and not for Sam Town on this occasion. In all seriousness, can I thank Councillor Marion Bateman for putting her name forward. I think it's good for democracy that at the beginning of a new term for the authority that members did have a choice in their voting. So thank you for Councillor Bateman for putting her name forward. And thank you for putting your trust and support in me. It's a privilege to take over as chair of the Fire and Rescue Authority for North Wales. And I can assure you that I will do my utmost to fulfil that role effectively and with 100% commitment. And can I take this opportunity to thank the previous chair, Councillor Peter Lewis, who has retired and served the authority so effectively. And he was an excellent mentor for me during my time as deputy chair. So I'd like to publicly thank Councillor Peter Lewis for his excellent work during his time as chair of the authority. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everybody to the meeting. I'd like to welcome the new members on the authority and also the returning members. And can I also welcome those from the Standards Committee that I could see attending the meeting today. Also, I think we have a representative from the Wales Audit Office. And also, can I welcome our new treasurer to the authority. I think it's his first meeting, Mr. David Edwards. Croeso i'r gyfarfod, David. And obviously, welcome. And also, obviously, welcome members of the North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. So just a few housekeeping rules before we continue. Obviously, if you wish to speak, if you raise your virtual hand, and I'll invite you to speak, but if you're not speaking, if you can continue on mute. And then I do know some of you very well, some of you less well, and some of you not at all. So in the interest of consistency, and because this meeting is being recorded, I will sort of invite you to speak, referring to you with your formal title. So without any further ado, let's continue with the meeting. I think the clerk actually skipped item number 1, apologies. Can we record the apologies, please, Alwen?
Apologies from Mark Jones, Tina Claydon, Chrissy G, Paul Rogers.
Thank you very much. I can see that Councillor Beverly Parry-Jones has a hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just that Councillor Paul Rogers had also asked me to put in his apologies, but I can see he's done it, so thank you.
Thank you for that. And going on now to item number 3, appointment of the deputy chair. Do we have a proposal for the deputy chair post, please? Councillor Nigel Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on achieving the chair of the authority. I have no doubt you will prove an excellent leader for us. Can I nominate Councillor Paul Cunningham? I think Paul's experience and his wealth of knowledge will be an excellent support to yourself as chair, and he will prove an excellent vice chair for the authority.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Before I ask for a seconder, I can see that Gareth has got his hand up.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Bateman had indicated that if she was unsuccessful in being elected for chair, she also wished to be considered for the position of deputy chair. So just for the information of members, they still have 2 options. They still have 2 choices should they wish.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gwynfor Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on being elected chair of the authority. It's my pleasure to second the name of Councillor Bob Cunningham. Thank you.
Deputy chair. Do either the proposer or seconder wish to add anything before we go to the vote? I presume not, so I take it, Gareth, that we can go straight to the vote in that case.
I just need to set up another poll with me, please.
Chair, I'm having trouble with my computer. I've just gone over to my iPad, so I'm just trying to sort it out.
Okay, it's coming up now. "19 have voted. Another 2 should be voting. It's still on 19.
It's not coming up on my phone, Alwyn.
Okay, Louisa is in the call. So from IT, so maybe Louisa can give some tips on how to get it up on the phone.
It should just appear, the poll.
It did on the first poll.
Right. The only thing I could suggest, Alwyn, is taking it down and putting it back up.
Okay, I'll end the poll and we'll try again. There was one other person that hadn't voted as well. So pre-launch poll. Oh, somebody's dropped out.
Yeah, it's working now. I've done it. Thank you.
Okay. Right, we're on 20 now, so there's 1 to vote, but I heard somebody drop out then, so I don't know if that was a councillor or an officer that dropped out of the call. It doesn't make any difference to the results, if that helps. Gareth.
In that case, Alwyn, can I suggest that we proceed?
Okay. So 20 have voted and I'll share the results now.
Thank you, Alwyn. So it's clear that Councillor Paul Cunningham has been elected as the Deputy Chair to the Authority. Congratulations to Councillor Paul Cunningham. I'm sure we can work well together going forward as the Chair and Deputy Chair. Would you like to say a few words? You're on mute at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. I was still struggling to look over. Diolch yn fawr pawb. Thank you, Dylan. I am very pleased to be elected, and thank you to my co-Flintshire member for standing against me. I've worked with Marion before. It's a pleasure to work for this authority. Although I'm new, I've got lots of experience in the fire brigade, or the fire and rescue as it's now known. So look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to the next item, which is item number 4, appointment of Chair and Deputy Chair of the Audit Committee. I understand that we won't be proceeding with that today. Gareth, do you want to explain? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to explain that we still haven't had all the nominations for the authority, and we do not yet know which members of the authority will be serving on the executive panel and which members will be serving on the audit committee. So the suggestion is that today we should delegate that to the audit committee itself. That will give members the opportunity to find out who is serving on which committee. It will give members the opportunity to possibly get to get to know each other a little better. And also, Chair, it will give us the opportunity to allow anybody who thinks they might wish to stand to again submit a short pen portrait explaining their qualifications for the role. So we will do that before the first meeting of the audit committee, which seems the best way to enable the members of that committee to understand and make the best choice.
Thank you, Gareth, for that explanation. Councillor Gwynfor Owen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the explanation. I've got a question with regards to nominations for the two committees. Who should members discuss this with? With the Fire Authority or with Gwynedd Council in my case? And in that case, which officers should we contact?
So, Chair, we do ask each constituent council to choose who they wish to serve on the exec panel, and we ask them to nominate two names. So between that and the chair and the vice chair, we get then to 14 members, which equates to half of the membership of the authority. The other 14 members will then automatically serve on the audit committee. I don't know how each council does that. Within Flintshire, for example, it's been custom and practice to allow the members themselves to choose. And so that's a conversation that I have agreed to have with Flintshire County Council members during the latter half of this week, now that they know what happened in terms of the election. I could suggest, Councillor Owen, that you have a chat with Vera Jones, who I think is the Democratic Services Manager at Gwynedd County Council, and ask her as to what is the practice and how have Gwynedd chosen their exec and audit panel members in the past.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank
It's
you.
clear that it's the responsibility of the local authority to sort this out. Can I take it that unless anybody else has anything to say, that we do accept your recommendation, Gareth, that it seems to make perfect sense that we adjourn this decision until we know who is actually sitting on which committee, and then the audit committee themselves can decide who they want as the chair and deputy chair. So unless anybody objects, we'll move on. Item number 5, notice of urgent matters. I haven't received any notice of urgent matters. Can you confirm that's the case, Gareth?
I can confirm that, Chair.
Thank you very much. So moving on to item 6, minutes of the annual meeting held last year on the 21st of June. The first thing that we need to do is to approve the minutes. So I need a member that was actually on the authority and was present at that meeting last year to propose, and another member to second that we actually approve the minutes, please. John Brynmore Hughes.
I'd like to propose, Chair.
Thank you very much to Councillor Bateman, and I think Councillor John Brynmore Hughes, are you seconding?
Yes, Chair, I'll second, and congratulations on your post.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. So the minutes have been approved. Are there any matters arising from members in relation to the minutes last year?
Chair, if I might, you need to take a vote as normal. Recognising the difficulties of elections, local authority law does allow members who were not at a meeting to vote as to the correctness of the minutes. It's simply a statement that they have trust in their officers that the minutes are a fair and accurate record. It's a pragmatic thing, Chair, given that membership can change.
Thank you for that, Gareth. So if you do approve the minutes, can you either raise your physical hand or your virtual hand to signify, please? That is unanimous from what I can see. Thank you. So going back to any matters arising, do members have any matters arising from the minutes last year that they wish to raise? Just for information of the new members, paragraph 8.4 says that it was resolved to agree that a working group be established to review the Constitution and report back to the authority with proposed changes. That has been done, and we do have now an amended Constitution, just for your information. I don't see any hands raised, so I think we can proceed to the next item, which is membership of the Fire and Rescue Authority. Back to you, Gareth, please. Diolch.
Thank you, Chair. Members can see the the names that we have been given from the constituent councils, they will note that as yet we haven't received all of them. We haven't received any names, or at the time of publication, we haven't received any names for Denbighshire. We still are unsure as to the precise membership from Denbighshire County Council, but you'll see there that we have, other than that, we have names from all the other councils split in accordance with the membership, which is drawn largely by population, as specified in the combination order which established the fire authority in the first place. So we have proportionate membership based on population size. Flintshire is the largest authority, Rhelmane 6, Gwynedd and Wrexham 5, Anglesey 3, Conwy 5, and Denbighshire 4. So we might bring that back, Chair, when we have the names from Denbighshire as well.
Thank you, Gav. Do we still proceed with the recommendation that's in the report at this stage?
Just to note it at this stage, yes, Chair.
Yeah, so paragraph 3, it says, to note the membership of the North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority is notified by the constituent councils for the term listed above. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? I can see Councillor Nigel Smith proposing and Councillor John Bryn Hughes seconding. Will you indicate that you support the recommendation, please? Diolch yn fawr, that has been passed. So the next item is appointments to committees and external bodies. Over to you again, please, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a number of issues here to address, Chair, and members will see them set out at page 19 of the agenda in the recommendations on the report. The first is whether the authority wishes to split into by political balance, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. The second is to make appointments to the executive panel and the audit committee, which we have touched on. That is typically left authorities. And so what we'll need to do there is a slight change and have authority delegated to the chief in consultation with yourself, just to note those as and when we receive them, and then we need to make appointments to outside bodies. So I'll start, if I might, with political balance. Within councils, constituent councils, often things called political groups form. This is where two or more members wish to be known as a group. They sometimes reflect national political parties, but don't always need to, and don't always. And then committee membership and a number of other things within councils are run on the basis of those political groups. Within the fire authority, it has been the convention for many years not to split into political groups, because whilst political groups work well within constituent authorities where people are all based together in one place, clearly being spread across the whole of the North Wales region, the groups don't work as well. And furthermore, the focus of the fire authority is very much on serving the whole of the North Wales population as a whole, as it says within the report, it is felt more conducive to work in an apolitical way within the fire authority to achieve those aims. So that's the resolution that it is possible for the authority to make, and we would ask or recommend that it be done again. It is possible if the membership wished to split on the basis of political groups, and if that were to be the case, then the constituent councils nominate their membership of this authority on the basis of their own political split. And so we should have a certain number of Labour councillors, a certain number of Plaid Cymru councillors, and so on and so forth. So it would be possible to aggregate those groups. We would not be able to do that today, Chair, so we would bring that back to the next meeting of the authority if that were to happen. Lastly, there are to be the nominations to outside bodies, and members will see from paragraph 6 of the report where which outside bodies the fire authority appoints to, and the people who normally represent the authority on those outside bodies. Two of those outside bodies, the WLGA Coordinating Committee and the LGA Fire Services Forum, say one representative on behalf of the three FRAs. And so what we would anticipate there is that the three FRAs would meet, have a conversation about which of the FRAs is to make that appointment, and then we would make the appointment subsequently once we know. But again, typically I think those would be the chair of the FRA representing each of the FRAs on those bodies. So it's usually the chair, but it may not be yourself, Councillor Rees. It might be the chair from another FRA. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, if there are any. But just to remind members of the proposals, which is that we consider whether or not to apply political balance. We delegate to the chief, resolving the membership of the panels, and we then make the appointments or some appointments to represent the authority on the outside bodies. And it does, within the recommendation, say that we should appoint 2 members to the Standards Committee, but that's in a separate group. We've isolated that out into a separate report, which I'll pick up later, Chair, if I might.
Thank you, Gareth. So I'm inviting questions and comments. Councillor Brian Apsley.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations. I would wish us to carry on in the normal way and not have political groups in this, and would follow the report in respect of the traditional way in which we appoint people to those particular appointments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Apsley. Councillor John Brimmer Hughes.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Aspley and second his proposal.
Diolch yn fawr. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Forgive me, I can't see everyone, so if I haven't sort of invited you to speak when you've raised your virtual hand, please interject. But I can't see anybody else who's indicated that they want to speak. So we do have a proposer and a seconder. The recommendations are at paragraph 3 of the report, 3 recommendations. Can you please raise your hand if you support the recommendation? Diolch yn fawr, that has been passed. So the next item on the agenda is item 10, appointments to the Standards Committee. Over to you again, please, Gareth. Diolch.
Thank you, Chair. So the Standards Committee, Chair, has a slightly unusual membership. It's the same across all of the constituent councils and any relevant authority that has a Standards Committee. A certain proportion of the committee must be what are called independent members with a capital I and a capital M. That doesn't mean they're a member of an independent group or that they stood, and indeed they have not stood, none of them have stood for election as an independent under the elections rules. Independent members with a capital I and a capital M are co-opted members of the authority. That is to say that they are recruited against a person specification that has been approved by the authority. And there are 4 independent members on the Fire and Rescue Standards Authority, at least 2 of whom are on the call today. In addition to those, there are two other members of the committee, and they are 2 elected members of the authority, and those are the 2 that we would wish to appoint today. It has been the practice, Chair, to appoint them for the full term of the authority. If we could have 2 nominations for people who can serve for the whole of the authority term in a moment, that would be of assistance. It is important, though, to note, Chair, that neither the chair nor the deputy chair can be nominated. So if people could bear that in mind when putting forward their nominations, please.
Thank you, Gareth. And obviously members can nominate themselves. So we're looking for 2 people to volunteer to go on this committee, please. Diolch yn fawr. I see Councillor Paul Cunningham, you've got your hand raised, although you can't actually sit on this committee.
No, all right, Chair. I was going to propose Councillor Marion Bateman for it, if that's okay.
Councillor Bateman, would you be happy to accept that nomination?
Yes, thank you very much, Paul, for that. Yes, I would be happy to accept. And I forgot to congratulate you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
A worthy chair, may I say.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bateman, and thank you for putting your name forward and agreeing to sit on the committee. Councillor Rob Triggs.
Hi, congratulations, Chair. I'd like to second Marion Bateman for this role, please.
Thank you very much. So we're still looking for one other person to sit on this committee, please.
Chair, if I might suggest that as we have somebody from the eastern end of the region, perhaps we might have somebody further west, and somebody who is bilingual in order to ensure full representation on the committee.
Cynghorydd John Brynmar Hughes. You're on mute at the moment.
Dwi digon bodlon sefyll.
I'm quite willing to stand to be on this standards committee.
Councillor Brian Apsley also has his hand up.
Yes, Chair. I would second John Brynmar Jones on that committee.
Excellent. I don't think anybody else has raised their hands. So can all the members show that we approve those two nominations? Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for that. So item 11, appointments to the local pension board. Gareth, diolch.
So the pension board, although described is not a committee in the sense that it consists entirely of councillors. The pension board is an advisory body for the authority, that looks over and makes sure that the authority is fulfilling its obligations as an employer, and also that monitors the work and receives reports from the pension administrator, which is Carmarthenshire in this case. The pension board consists of equal numbers of employer representatives and employee representatives. So there are members of the FBU, and there is typically a principal officer as employee representatives. In the past, Chair, we have had both the clerk and the treasurer as employer representatives, and I am happy to serve again. And it's up to the new treasurer whether he wishes to do so as well. And then that would mean that we would need a slightly smaller number of councillors, but we're happy to serve alongside councillors in order to make up those numbers, Chair.
Gareth, I may be wrong, but can I just confirm that we still actually need 4 representatives from the members? I thought it was less.
It's 4. Well, we need 4 members, 4 employer representatives. If 2 of those are officers, you would need 2 councillors.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was trying to get my head around. So we only actually then, providing the clerk and the treasurer agree, we only need to nominate 2 members from ourselves then.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, I can see that our new treasurer, Mr. David Edwards, has got his hand up. I take it, David, that you are willing to sit on this committee?
Yeah, diolch, Cadeirydd. Just
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that, yes. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Members, we need 2 representatives. I know that Councillor Brian Apsley has done excellent service on this committee in the past. Could I be so bold as to ask him if he'd be prepared to sit on it again?
Yes, thank you very much.
Excellent. So that we have one nominee. Do we have another, please?
And Chair, whilst people are summoning the courage to stand on the committee, stand for this committee, we will need a formal proposer and a seconder for that as well, for all 4 names.
Okay. Cynghorwyr John Brynman Hughes?
Yeah, I've sat on this for the last 5 years, so if nobody else wants to do it, I'll put my name forward.
Diolch yn fawr. So we have Councillor Brian Apsley, we have Councillor John Brynman Hughes, we have the clerk, and we have the treasurer, all prepared to sit on this committee. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'll be happy to propose those candidates, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Ken Taylor, Councillor Ken Taylor.
Dwi'n hapus i eilio yr enwebiadau.
I'm happy to second the nominations. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Excellent. That has been passed. Diolch yn fawr. Item 12, the meeting dates for the next 12 months. Gareth?
Chair, very little to add to the written report. The meeting dates are there, they're published. Perhaps, Chair, in agreement with with yourself, if those need to be amended, we will amend them during the course of the year.
Excellent. I don't think we need to propose in second. Can you just raise your hands if you agree with the meeting dates, please? Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for that. Item 13, the members' remuneration scheme.
I'll say a little about this, if I might, Chair, as much for the benefit of people who might be watching on the broadcast as anything else. Members, whether they are councillors on the constituent council or members of the Fire Authority and Rescue Authority, as in your case, do not set their own levels of remuneration. Those are set by an independent body called the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales. It is tasked with making sure that councillors receive a fair comparative rate for the role that they undertake, and it produces a consultation version of its proposed findings towards the end of each calendar year. So in November, December time, it will produce a consultative document setting out the rates for the forthcoming year. And then those will be finalised in the new calendar year. They have been published, therefore, already for the year 22-23. And as in previous years, they provide for a small additional payment to councillors who are members of the Fire and Rescue Authority, and slight uplifts in case of senior responsibility allowances for those members who hold positions of authority within the Fire and Rescue Authority. As it says within the report, those SRAs, as they're called, senior responsibility allowances, no member can hold more than you don't hold more than two of those. And if you were, in your case, Chair, to be on a cabinet in your constituent council, then you would not be in receipt of a senior responsibility allowance for the FRA on your role on the FRA. So that's how the independent remuneration panel balances out payment and make sure that payments are proportionate, given that they come from the public purse. The actual rates to be paid to members are within paragraph 7 of the report on page 21. And in addition to that, those rates, there are rates noted for the independent members, the capital I and the capital M of the Standards Committee. They are paid slightly differently. They're paid per meeting that they undertake, allowing for preparation time. In addition, members can claim travel and subsistence in relation to official duties that they undertake on behalf of the Fire Authority, and those are again set out within paragraphs 11 onwards of the report. What we need to do, Chair, once we've allocated the roles, which we've done today, we will bring back a report to the next authority meeting, just setting out the schedule of remuneration for the year ahead. So it will identify who are the SRA holders going forward. And at the end of each year, we have to publish what each person has been paid in respect of their roles as well. But that's to come at future meetings.
Thank you, Gareth, for that.
Questions, Chair?
Thank you, Gareth, for that explanation. Do members have any questions or comments they wish to raise before we go to the recommendations? I can't see anybody indicating so. So the recommendations are contained at paragraph 3 of the report. It's in 2 parts. Number 1 is about noting the IRPW's determinations in relation to the allowances and remuneration, and the second part's about the delegated authority to be given to the clerk. Can I have a proposer and a seconder in relation to the recommendations? Councillor Nigel Smith is proposing. It was a tight race for seconding, but I think it was the deputy chair that just got there, Councillor Paul Cunningham. Can you all indicate if you support the recommendations, please? Excellent, thank you very much. Item 14 is urgent matters. There's no urgent matters for discussion. Am I right, Gareth?
Correct, Chair.
And part 2, there are no items for discussion. So that brings the first part of this morning to a close, namely the annual general meeting. So we will move straight on now to part 2. Just before we do, Councillor Arwen, you've got your hand raised, or was that just in relation to? No. Okay, so we will now move on to part 2, or the second part of this morning, which is the annual, so the quarterly business meeting. So the first item is apologies. I don't know if the apologies have changed. Alan, have we had any more apologies?
No, it's the same. Mark Jones, Tina Claydon, Chrissy G and Paul Rogers.
Thank you very much. And for this part of the meeting, now I will invite any declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that members may have, please?
Councillor Brimore Hughes has indicated, Chair.
Councillor Hughes?
Chair, I must apologise. I've got to leave the meeting now. I have another meeting to attend.
Fine, that's noted. Diolch yn fawr am mynychu y cyfarfod gyntaf. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much for attending the first meeting. Thank you.
Noted that there was no declarations of interest is notice of urgent matters. And
Chair.
once again,
Chair, sorry, just before we move off item 2, we do have item 9, which is a report about the firefighters pension scheme. At least one member of the authority is an ex-firefighter. There would be a personal interest only, but there would be a personal interest in that item.
I think that we've got more than one member. So would members who are ex-firefighters like to indicate, please?
So there's Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Triggs, and Chair, simply, as I say, just a personal interest. It doesn't, just for by way of explanation, for those members who are new and for people watching online, there are 2 types of interest. There's a personal interest. A member can declare a personal interest and remain fully engaged in the meeting, take part and vote. And if there is a personal and prejudicial interest, in which case the member must take no part in the meeting, must not vote, and we would, if they declared a personal and prejudicial interest, move them temporarily into a lobby for that item so that they can take no part in the meeting, and then we would bring them back at the end of it. So you have Councillor Rob Triggs and Councillor Cunningham who have indicated. Councillor Jeff Evans has indicated as well, Chair.
Yes, I understand that Councillor Jeff Evans is also a former firefighter. Can you confirm, Councillor Evans?
Yes, I can confirm as a former firefighter. Can I also say, Councillor Rees, that for whatever reason, we had a power strike here for the last 15 minutes. So I've only now managed to get back in. So I've missed whatever has happened in the previous 15 minutes.
Thank you for that explanation, Councillor Evans. So thank you for highlighting that, Gareth, and for that explanation. So going back to the agenda, notice of urgent matters. I take it, Gareth, that no urgent matters have been received?
There are none, Chair.
Thank you for that. So moving on to item 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of March 2022. So once again, I need a proposer and a seconder from somebody who was at that meeting that we approve the minutes in the first instance, please. I think Councillor Marion Bateman, followed by Councillor Brian Apsley. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Will everybody indicate that they're happy to approve the minutes, please? Excellent, diolch yn fawr. So the next item is any matters arising from the last meeting. I can't see any members indicating. Can I draw members' attention, please, to paragraph 9.3 of the last meeting, especially, I think it's worthwhile pointing this out, especially for the new members on the authority, because it talks about the corporate plan for 2021-24 and the key challenges identified and the actions that need to be taken to start addressing those, such as, and I'm just going to read out what it says, maintaining enough availability of on-call fire crews, ensuring enough resources to maintain and develop firefighter skills, and having sufficient corporate capacity to meet current and future demand. Now, the Chief did touch on those in the induction meeting that we had last Thursday, and I think members need to be aware that these major challenges are issues that we will need to monitor and evaluate the progress going forward. So I just wanted to draw members' attention to those. But I don't see that there are any specific matters arising. So unless anybody indicates otherwise.
Can I just continue what you were saying as far as those items of interest to members? The review into the on-call, which is around our availability, that started in March, and we'll anticipate at least an interim report to be ready for September. And the review into the training requirements started in April, and we would look to bring something back at a similar time so that members understand the progress that we've made in those areas. And we'll report on the corporate capacity, which a number of those posts we are already filling and been able to make progress with them. So thank you for pointing that out.
Excellent, thank you, Chief. So if there's no other matters arising, we'll move on to item 6, which is a wildfires presentation for Assistant Chief Fire Officer Stuart Millington. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair, and bore da pawb. If you bear with me 1 second whilst I navigate the ICT. Can you just confirm that you can see the slides?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. So this morning I wanted to talk to you about wildfire and take you through this morning a description of what wildfire is and what challenges that they present to us as a service and to our partners, and to describe also some of the more recent and up-to-date techniques that we're using, the changes in how we tackle wildfires currently. So, what is a wildfire? A wildfire, in terms of a dictionary definition, describes it as a large destructive fire that spreads quickly over woodland or brush. North Wales, we have significantly large areas of open spaces and woodland covered with bracken, heather, grass and so on, owned by either private land owners or by Natural Resources Wales. Significant proportion of these open spaces are owned by Natural Resources Wales. I'm sure that councillors will recall that back in 2018, nationally, as a result of significant dry spells, there were a significant number of wildfires. Here in North Wales, we did have a significant wildfire as well during that year, and challenged crews for many weeks and months. And this picture that you see on screen is from that incident in Llantysilio. Picture was taken using the North Wales Police drone and was of an area that was extensive. Llantysilio, and the area of concern, is a special area of conservation. It's also a site of specific scientific interest and an area of outstanding natural beauty. The incident damaged 247 hectares or 610 acres, or the equivalent of 247 rugby pitches. So it was a large area. The road from Llandegla to Llangollen was shut for several weeks, and smoke spread over North East Wales towards Merseyside. So this and many other incidents like it proved to be problematic. They utilise extensive resources and challenge our fire crews in arduous conditions, often over very difficult terrain. So what are the impacts? So the impacts from a fire and rescue service perspective, firstly, in 2018, the wildfires reached an all-time high with 626 incidents during that period. Since then, we've seen reductions, but of course, we've done lots to try to prevent wildfires, but many of the reductions will be as a result of COVID and an overall reduction in operational incidents, as people being confined to their home addresses. But we really must redouble our efforts to make sure that the incidents don't return to pre-COVID levels. Last year, we received 289 calls to wildfires in comparison to 319 in 2020. So you can see a significant reduction in numbers there, but the numbers don't paint the full picture, because an individual number may result in an incident which takes 30 minutes to resolve or 30 days to resolve. And so the impact isn't necessarily in just the numbers, it's in the size and scale of the incidents. And we're now experiencing larger and more severe fires that take longer to extinguish and require greater resources. And this is a trend that's been replicated nationally. I'll touch on why that is in a moment. The second of the impacts, though, is the impact that wildfires can have on the community, not only as the result of fire spread to land and property, but also in the need to evacuate homes, and as a result of closing roads or nearby businesses because of smoke or fire spread, sometimes for a significant period. And this obviously has a damaging impact on local economy. Clearly, from a third risk in relation to the environment, and this isn't only as a result of the carbon emitted from large smoke plumes that travel excessive distances, but it's also in relation to the damaging of habitat, nesting sites for many different birds, rare birds or small mammals. Finally, then from a partner agency perspective, we don't resolve these incidents alone. And as a result, there are impacts on the time and resources of a number of partners, including police, Natural Resources Wales, water companies, and local authorities, to name a few. So how do these fires start? Picture in the top left there shows a child with matches, and often children do get the blame. And it may be the case that children do start some of these fires, but that's not what I would consider to be the main cause in North Wales anyway. That's not necessarily replicated in other parts of Wales, but children would have to travel extensive distances on foot to set fires in some very remote locations. And so I think that's relatively low level in terms of the number of people who set fires. The picture in the bottom left shows a bottle and a magnification. I've heard various theories over the years about bottles magnifying sunlight to start fires, but I think that, again, that is something that doesn't happen very often. More often, though, carelessly discarded cigarettes thrown from car windows, sparks from steam trains, disposable barbecues are other potential causes. But on the bottom right, we can see a picture there. It's not necessarily Jeremy Clarkson personally, but farmers in general who are utilising burning to manage their land or to clear an area for new crops. And whilst burning is a recognised method to do this, there's a requirement for farmers to have a burn plan that should include a means to extinguish the fire and sufficient people to properly manage it. However, often this is not the case, and fires develop more quickly than they're prepared for and get out of control, and we end up getting the call. So why are we getting more fires? Well, firstly, we're experiencing far more extremes of weather, with hotter and longer dry periods in the summers, resulting in vegetation becoming very dry, and fires can ignite very easily and travel across large distances very quickly. In addition, though, the picture on the right shows changes in farming practices and grant subsidies have meant that land is no longer managed in the way that it once was. The types of sheep that would have grazed in upland areas in the past are no longer as profitable, and therefore greenery in these locations has continued to grow, drop, regrow, creating very thick layers of peat type fuel that can propagate fire under the surface, with fires spreading up to 1.5 meters underground. And this was certainly the case at Llantysilio. The fires were burning up to 1.5 meters underground and then popping up in another part of the mountainside and continuing to spread along. And it's because of this that we need to change our approach to tackling these fires. I'll come on to that a little bit later. In terms of our powers, or the powers to address these issues, Fire and Rescue Service work with North Wales Police to deal with any fires that have been started deliberately, and any deliberate fire with an identifiable perpetrator, and that's not always as easy as it may seem, will be prosecuted by the police in the same way as they would be if they started a deliberate fire anywhere else. But utilising fire as a means to manage land is subject to the heather and grass burning Wales regulations of 2008, and the heather and grass burning code for Wales 2008 provides an explanation in simple terms of how to comply with these regulations. Burns should only take place between sunrise and sunset, and there are a number of other rules that apply, including the dates when burning are permitted. And these dates, I'm not expecting, there won't be a test, I'm not expecting you to remember these dates, but the dates are between the 1st of October and the 31st of March in upland areas every year, and from the 1st of November to the 15th of March elsewhere. Outside of these dates, it is still possible to undertake burns, but there needs to be a licence obtained from the enforcing authority, and that's Welsh Government. So Welsh Government are the enforcing authority for the regulations. They may grant in very specific circumstances, but the reasons for these dates is very much around the animals that nest on sites and so on, and when they're raising their young. But often the problem is that in the early months leading up to March, the weather isn't as good, so farmers don't sort of set the fires until right towards the end of that period, and sometimes beyond it. So our peak of activity is usually towards the middle and end of March, and then sometimes dropping into April as well. So how can we prevent them? Well, as with all incidents, it's better to prevent rather than having to respond. 3 Welsh Fire and Rescue Services in Wales have produced a Welsh arson reduction strategy, which includes items such as working with the local areas. We have an arson reduction team who work to educate people in the area and have a high profile in areas where we know deliberate fires take place. And we work to engage young people through diversionary activities. We also work with Natural Resources Wales and landowners to advise on developing land management plans and methods to reduce the risk of large fire spread. I work with children and young people, whether that be in schools or through our Phoenix scheme, which I'm sure members may have heard of, or through our interventions with deliberate fire setters. We'll work to educate on the dangers and impacts of all types of fires, including wildfires. We also work to engage the farming community at farmers markets. So firstly, to make sure that they let us know if they're going to have a fire, but also then so that we can advise them on the plans that they need to have in place and the resources they need to have in place to burn safely and to operate in accordance with the code and the regulations. So how do we tackle them? Historically, the means of fighting fires has been to use water and beaters at the scene of operations. This is difficult, physical and dangerous work, with firefighters working in very hot conditions and over very difficult terrain. The vehicles shown at the top of this picture are 2 of our vehicles that we've used at wildfires in the past, Pinzgauer and Braemar, Pinzgauer on the left and Braemar on the right. And these vehicles historically were taken off-road and were used to pump water at very high pressures to extinguish vehicles. We no longer take the vehicles off-road, but they can still be used at wildfires from hard standing. The kit, though, that our firefighters wear at wildfires is actually not designed for this purpose. It's designed to fight fires in buildings. and it doesn't allow firefighters to keep cool when working at wildfire incidents. So since the peak at Llantysilio and following a number of debriefs and reviews, we've improved the management and resolution of these types of incidents. And the service also looked to our partner agencies to assist. The review looked at training, equipment and vehicles. 2019 saw the first cohort of managers being sent on a nationally recognised wildfire course at a tactical level. This course gave managers the practical training and knowledge in how to predict where the fire would spread to, and using a variety of new techniques which we are rolling out for our staff. In 2020, e-learning packages for all operational staff was created, and further managers were sent for additional training. We developed in-house through our fleet department some bespoke wildfire vehicles, and that's the vehicle that you can see at the bottom picture there. And these 3 bespoke vehicles based in Corwen, Abergele and Carnarvon were also introduced to the service in 2020. The wildfire vehicles carry different types of equipment to those on standard fire appliances and can be used to create fire breaks, or can assist with suppressing fire with fogging systems that contain water that can be pumped to 500 meters away from the vehicle, so preventing the need for the vehicle to taken away from hard standing, but enabling us to get water up to 500 meters away from hard standing. But also recognizing that other techniques rather than water are also required. Leaf blowers used for controlling the direction of fire and the extinguishing of them. Drip torches used to carry out tactical burns where we burn back the area of fuel so that the fire will burn itself out. And since 2020, designated wildfire officers have been attending wildfire incidents to provide tactical advice to our incident commanders. Fire behaviour during wildfire is very dynamic. Fire activity is influenced by many factors: time of day, wind direction, strength, and the slope of the area and terrain are all factors which can have a detrimental effect on fire spread and can change very quickly. Wind direction changes, things like that can have a significant effect on fires. So, wildfires in the future then. There's currently further reviews underway, which will be completed shortly, and that's seeking to further professionalise our response to wildfires. These reviews consider everything from welfare facilities for staff at large incidents through to the most up-to-date techniques, skills and equipment required to tackle wildfires. Some of these techniques can be seen in these pictures. So the picture on the top left is showing somebody with a drip torch, which is basically a device which sets fire to fuel, which then burns back and prevents a fire from developing beyond a certain point because we've taken the fuel away. And it seems counterintuitive for firefighters to be starting fires, but this is the techniques that are utilised to prevent fires getting out of control by removing the fuel. Picture on the top right is one of those leaf blowers in operation. These control the direction that the fire will develop, as well as keeping it under control. Bottom left shows an individual cutting a fire break with a device there utilised for cutting a fire break. But as you can see also, these firefighters are wearing different equipment, different personal protective equipment. The red kit that's being worn is different to the one that we utilise currently. These firefighters are operating in South Wales Fire and Rescue Service wearing this kit, and it's already mentioned, as I said, that the existing kit makes it very hot incidents. This lightweight cooler kit for staff is probably going to be teased out in terms of a recommendation, and this and lots of other equipment that may be required to improve our response will need to be factored in to our future budget provision. As already mentioned, practical training for wildfire crews was introduced in North Wales Fire and Rescue Service from 2020 and is still developing. To assist with the training, the service has worked with Denbighshire Wardens to identify and use suitable locations to provide opportunities for wildfire crews to practice these newer techniques, including burnbacks and creating fire breaks. Benefits of this joint working with partners from the Denbighshire Wardens has enhanced the crew's knowledge of wildfire behaviour, as well as the Wardens' knowledge to increase their own understanding of our capabilities. So future collaboration will see North Wales Fire and Rescue Service tactical wildfire managers working more closely with things like helicopters. And if this plays, yes, it's playing now. The techniques of utilising helicopters is one that we've embarked on recently. Helicopters can drop large quantities of water from the sky. Helicopter that we utilise is provided by a company called Airborne Solutions and is funded by Natural Resources Wales, with a condition that it's used on land that's owned by Natural Resources Wales or land adjacent to it that could spread to their land. Helicopter is an all Wales resource and is based at South Wales Fire and Rescue Service headquarters during the peak burn season. When requested, as long as it's not already in use by one of the other services, the helicopter will fly to North Wales, agree a suitable location to pick up water, and then commence firefighting operations. It can only operate during daylight hours and has a number of locations in the north that it can refuel and lay down overnight. The helicopter is a highly effective tool and is another tool in the toolbox actually for incident commanders to consider. And we've used this helicopter at a number of incidents already. It's assisted in a far quicker resolution of the incident than would have been the case previously when you consider the number of firefighters that would have historically been tied up at wildfire incidents for days or even weeks. The use of the helicopter can actually negate all of this. And even though the cost of the helicopter is relatively expensive at £1,350 per hour, it can be cost neutral as a result of the fact that it deals with things so very quickly. And the last slide just shows, for interest, a helicopter filling at one of our sites in North Wales. Which is quite interesting if you've not seen this before. Okay, so members, I'm happy to take any questions in relation to wildfires.
Thank you, Stuart, for a very interesting and informative presentation. So I can immediately see some hands going up. Councillor Ken Taylor first, followed by Councillor Paul Cunningham.
Thank you very much for the presentation, very interesting. I don't know if this is coincidence or not, but actually we had a fire some 30 yards from where I live yesterday evening. It was very worrying. There's a business here long established that sells heating oil and diesel, and it's next door to this area. There used to be an old auction place where the farmers used to sell cattle and sheep many years ago, which has now been developed into a housing estate. And what had happened, some youngsters had set a shed on fire, and obviously I went down there, I spoke to the police and to the fire officers, and they were a bit worried because there's a lot of asbestos on the site. My question is really, they did their work, a fantastic job as they usually do, and they contained the fire. How rare or how common is it for youngsters to, set fires like this? Actually, this is the second one in a week here in Valley, and I believe the police have a couple of names, and it seems to be the same ones that are doing it all the time. What sort of conversations do you have with the North Wales Police? And I know maybe it's not your place to comment, but would you say that the punishment is severe enough in cases like this? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of deliberate fire setting, it is a problem for us, and we continue to work with our youth intervention schemes. We have a number of these schemes that deal with deliberate fire setters, so people who are actually spoken to because they have a history of fire setting. And we have a number of other youth intervention schemes. Our arson reduction team goes into schools, goes into youth clubs, and works to try to educate young people about the dangers and the fact that you will or you may well end up with a criminal record that can have a detrimental effect on your prospects in your future life and career. So we work to try to prevent and educate young people as much as we can. We do still continue to have deliberate fires. It's not always children. Children get the blame lots of the time. It's often youth or young adults for a variety of other reasons that you know may well be a consideration for people. People set fires for all different reasons. Motivation for setting fire isn't just out of merriment. It often is as a result of insurance claims and things like that. And it's very easy to blame children because it shifts the focus to them, and it often isn't them. So whilst we do work to educate and update, we will work with our partners, with the police and others, to make sure that we do all we can to bring people to account if they can be identified and if there are witnesses and so on. So yes, we do work with. In terms of the level of punishment, then obviously we operate within the court system, the justice system, and so on. So I couldn't really comment on that.
Thank you.
And just to add to the comments from Stuart, that the Fire Rescue Service and the authority do sit on a number of strategic partnerships together with the police and other authorities to try and address issues such as this. Councillor Cunningham and then Councillor Arwyn Harold Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question really, it's just a comment. Thank you, Stuart, for the report. It's obvious to me that there's a vast improvement in tackling wildfires from 1976. I was a member of the then Clwyd Fire Authority, and it was awesome to attend one of these wildfires. They weren't called wildfires in those days, Chair. It was just a major blaze on a mountainside or on the moors or wherever. And I think the authority is to be congratulated on the way that they set their manpower out to tackle these incidents. It takes large numbers of men, and as Stuart said, they can be there for a long time. So it's marvellous to see the progress that's been made with the authority to tackle these sorts of fires and to try and keep the manpower down. But I think the general public should be got at a lot more to try and reduce this sort of thing. I know I sit on the AOMB, and we do, through our publications, try to encourage and educate people on the use of barbecues and so on. But I think the authority should be congratulated with the kit that they've got, the appliances they've got. And I think we should really be looking at providing our firefighters with proper and adequate firefighting kit, their personal kit, to deal with these incidents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Arwyn Roberts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's just that I live in Tryfan Ward here in Gwynedd, where we've had terrible fires over the past 2 years on the mountain. And of course, in April, we had the major fire above Carmel. I went down there at that point. It had happened on Mynydd Mawr, and I saw what was going on and the work that the firefighters were doing. It was excellent. My question is, how much pressure does this put on the service? When I was down there, there were firefighters from Hull, from Bangor, from the Llŷn Peninsula. They're going to be there for 3 or 4 days. So how much pressure does that put on the service financially, and with them having to put in these long hours to tackle the wildfires? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Very much. So you're quite correct in terms of the pressure it puts on the organisation. I think if we look back to Llantysilio, I think every station in North Wales attended that incident, bar 2 stations. Throughout the period of that incident, a rotation of staff around that. People do travel long distances to attend these incidents that may go on for some days. I think that the changes in techniques and the use of things like the helicopter will significantly help us in that respect by dealing with incidents more quickly. The weight of attack that we deploy to these incidents in the first that when the first calls come now are more. We throw resources at these incidents to make sure that we can get it under control as quickly as we can, and we deploy that increased weight of attack. But there are occasions where crews are tied up for significant periods, and I think we've already talked about the availability of our RDS or on-call firefighters resources. We would love every on-call station to be available 24/7. That isn't the case, so it does strip resources out, and it does put pressure on other parts of the service. Our control room dynamically move those resources around to make sure that we're available to turn out to incidents across North Wales or other incidents to make sure that our communities remain safe. And they do that dynamically based upon the level of incidents that are going on at the time. But yeah, it is a finite resource, and it does get put under extensive pressure for sure.
I have three other members who've indicated that they want to speak. I'm just going across my screen in the order I can see them. So first of all, Councillor Rhonda Roberts, followed by Councillor Brian Apsley, and then Councillor Gwynfor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Stuart. I was just wondering if I could pass on my thanks for the response from North Wales Fire Authority in relation to the incident on the 15th of June below the World Heritage Site in Llangollen Rural. The speed of which they attended, I'm not sure which crew came out, but the speed of the attendance and the the quick extinguishing of the incident. Just wondering if any cause or any culprits were caught or found in the incident starting in the field, which could have got a lot. It was contained very quickly. It could have got serious in the area.
Yeah, I think that without commenting on individual cases, individual causes, often it's very difficult to identify a cause at a wildfire because of the vast area that it covers. Unless somebody's actually been seen or somebody puts their hand up and says, I'm a farmer and it's got out of control, I'm sorry. It's very difficult to determine a cause because, as I said, a vast area. Any fire investigation will go through a series of looking at the potential causes and discounting them one at a time. Whereas in an area that's covering number of hectares and acres and so on, that process becomes very difficult. So I couldn't comment on the individual incident, but in terms of in general terms, it is often very difficult unless somebody has seen, we've got witnesses, or we've seen somebody who's deliberately set fire.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Apsley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stuart, for your presentation. Very interesting, and it's a shame that many more individuals couldn't actually see what you do on that area. I don't want to add to your already busy job description and tasks, but do you know how many offenders get caught and what percentage are repeat offenders? And just a final comment, really, that it's nice to see that the helicopter is cost neutral, which is, we wish we could spread that to the many other factors that we're dealing with day by day. Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, so in terms of the numbers of people that are caught, setting wildfires in North Wales, not very many. As I said, it's very difficult to identify culprits at this type of incident. And before the call goes in, then often the person who set the fire is no longer around. In terms of other types of deliberate fires and working with our police and partners to identify and prosecute, then of course we do have intelligence around individuals who may have a propensity to be fire setters and continue activities. And other types of deliberate fires we have more success with because they are in smaller areas or in areas where there's other intelligence like CCTV and people, witnesses and so on. But wildfires, I would suggest not very many. I couldn't give you a number, I'm afraid.
Okay, we have Councillor Gwynfor Owen, followed by Councillor Nigel Smith, and then I'm going to draw this item to an end so we can move on with the rest of the agenda. Thank you. Gwynfor, diolch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two comments and two questions following on. The Vice Chair has touched on one of the comments I wanted to make, which is the outfit or the uniform that they've got for the wildfires. I'm glad to understand that the ones in South Wales have had them, but I'm hoping that when will our staff here in North Wales get these vital uniforms? Because obviously the staff are our most important resource, and this is so true for our authority here. So I'd like to know when the staff up here are going to get those uniforms. And I was surprised to hear to say about the helicopter that Natural Resources Wales has a condition saying that the helicopter should only be used for their lands or neighbouring lands. I think that's a rather selfish attitude. And I think maybe we should put pressure on Natural Resources Wales to come to an agreement with the fire service. If it's required, then it's required. Doesn't matter whose land it's on or the neighbouring land if it's needed. So I think it's important that we come to an agreement with Natural Resources Wales so that there's no argument, oh no, that's not our land, you're not allowed to borrow it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll come to your second point first, if you don't mind. So the issue of helicopter. So Natural Resources Wales fund the use of the helicopter on their land or on land that's adjacent or neighbouring to it. They have a budget for that and they pay for it in its entirety. So there's no bill on the Fire and Rescue Service at all in those circumstances. But they don't stop us calling to utilise it in other areas of land if we're going to pay the bill. So we do have the opportunity to utilise the helicopter in other locations as well, but then there's an issue of financing that particular arrangement. And as I said, £1,350 per hour with a minimum flight time of 2 hours. You can imagine it does mount up quite quickly. But as I said earlier, it's very, a couple of hours of use of the helicopter can negate a week or two of having firefighters up and down the mountain. So it certainly is a tactic that we do consider more and more. To date, at this point, there has not been an incident where we've used a helicopter that we've had to pay for it, because there is most areas of land of wildfire borders or neighbours land that's owned by NOW, and so there can be a case made that if this fire went unchecked, it may move into that forestry over there, or it may move into that area over there, which is owned by Natural Resources Wales. So at this point, to be fair, they have funded the use of the helicopter, but we do have the facility if we need to use it on land that's not in that circumstance. And it only tends to be an issue towards the end of the financial year when the budget's looking a bit empty as a result of it being used not only in North Wales but also in South and Mid and West Wales. It's a budget for the whole of Wales. In terms of the kit, as I mentioned, we have a wildfire review that's underway right now, which is looking at everything that we do. We've made leaps and bounds in terms of our use of equipment and vehicles and so on since 2018, training and so on. But the next stage or the next phases of that now is to look in more depth at things like personal protective equipment, at things like welfare facilities on incidents. We need to be able, we're operating in the middle of the countryside for extended periods. We need to make sure that our firefighters have the ability to visit the bathroom, to be able to eat and have food and rest and all of those kinds of things. So it's a wider review than the fire kit, but the fire kit is very much part of it. The ability for firefighters to stay cool and protected at incidents which are very physically demanding, it certainly, I'm sure, will be one of the recommendations. But it will come with a price tag, of course, which will need to be worked in to the coming year's financial budget. So yeah, I'd like to think that we're in a position where we can move relatively quickly because the fire kit is already on a framework. So procurement, we're already listed on framework for procurement. So we want to try the kit out, make sure it's fit for purpose for staff in North Wales. But then I think, once we've worked that through, we should be in a position to move relatively quickly on it.
Councillor Smith.
Well, to be honest, the questions I was going to ask have just been answered, so I won't keep the members any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Stuart, for your presentation. Once again, it's obviously sparked a lot of interest amongst members. Perhaps that was the wrong word, sparked. Sorry. Okay, moving on to the next item of the agenda, item 7, the financial year end, and over to Assistant Chief Fire Officer Helen MacArthur. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask the new Treasurer, Mr. David Edwards, to say a few words before I introduce the details. So I don't know if, David, if you're happy to say a few words.
Yeah,
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Dylan Rees on being elected Chair and Councillor Paul Cunningham on being elected Vice Chair, and also congratulate all members of being elected for the first time or being re-elected to their constituent councils and for becoming members of the Fire Authority. If I can just introduce myself, I'm David Edwards. I was Treasurer with Gwynedd Council up until December 2021. I've been round the block. I remember meeting Councillor Jeff Evans in Icheldry back in the 80s when I was Chief Auditor in Anglesey County Council. I've met a number of the members on several other organisations. I've been the Statutory Finance Officer for GWE and the North Wales Ambition Board and so on. So I'm looking forward to working with you on the Fire Rescue Authority for the next 5 years. I'll come back to a number of things later, but first of all, I'd like to hand back over to Helen MacArthur to introduce the financial statement. But if I can just say a few words before you consider approval, please.
Diolch, David, a bore da pawb.
Thank you, David, and good morning all.
As David has just explained, the report on the agenda today covers the draft financial performance for the financial year 2021-22 and also the year-end position as at 31st of March in respect of our balance sheet. For the benefit of new members, I'd like to provide a little bit by way of background. Under the accounts and audit regulations, we're required each year to prepare a draft statement of accounts, which are then presented to audit by the 31st of March. Whilst this deadline has been temporarily extended by the Welsh Government to provide flexibility due to COVID, I'm really pleased to be able to confirm that this extension was not required by us. The finance team was able to produce the accounts by the deadline of the 31st of May, which is a huge achievement. I can't overstate the effort that this takes, as the team is relatively small, and actually during the same period they were implementing a new ledger system, and also we'd undertaken corporate restructuring. So at a personal level, I would like to extend my grateful thanks to all of the officers involved. The accounts have now been passed to Audit Wales. They're the authority's external auditors, and they will undertake their audit work over the next few months. Turning to the accounts themselves, they are by their nature technical, and you'll see they've been appended in the papers today, and they actually extend to over 63 pages. The form and content is broadly prescribed by the various CIPFA codes and also incorporates international accounting standards. However, the technical adjustments required to comply with these accounting codes can make it very difficult for the user to reconcile between the normal financial updates that we prepare and present at each meeting and the financial statements that you're seeing today. And to aid understanding, the narrative report is set out on pages 8 to 15 within the accounts, and I would advocate that this is a really good starting point for anybody wanting to get into that level of detail. I won't go through the accounts line by line, but today I would like to work through the key messages with yourselves. I'm going to start with the revenue position. The revenue budget for 2021-22 was £37.1 million, and this was approved by members at the meeting in November 2020, and that definitely feels like a long time ago. But when setting the budget, we noted the exceptional circumstances that had been presented by COVID, and also the inherent uncertainty and changing environment. I think it's fair to say that these challenges have certainly prevailed this year, both with the easing and tightening of COVID restrictions, issues around the global supply chain, and also inflation. Although we are slowly returning to our new normal, there have been knock-on effects on both our activities, our staff, and also consequently our finances. In overall terms, we've achieved a balanced outturn position, and due to some delays and uncertainty, this includes a transfer to earmarked reserves in the order of 2.4 million. The earmarked reserves will allow us that financial flexibility that we need, and that enables us to implement both the new structure that was approved by members in January 2022, but also undertake those critical reviews into the issues identified by the Chief Fire Officer. And these include the RDS review, which is looking at the availability of our retained crews, the training review, and also the work around the wildfires that you've heard from ACFO Millington today. As a public sector body, our major cost base relates to our staff, and this accounts for over 70% of our expenditure. And therefore, the careful management of staff and training costs is absolutely critical to our financial stability. At the start of the financial year, we were able to recommence our training and recruitment, and of particular note this year was our success in progressing 2 cohorts of firefighter apprentices, a total of 18. Due to capacity issues, it was not possible to undertake an exercise to recruit into the whole-time duty system, although members will be pleased to note that this is now progressing and appointments are anticipated by September of this year. Recruitment into the retained system is an ongoing challenge, and although we've made provision within the budget to appoint a further 40 members of staff during 2021-22, this unfortunately was not achieved. We were successful in bringing new members of staff in, but these were counteracted by an equal number of leavers. So once again, this remains a key challenge for us. We've also experienced higher than normal retirements and leavers, both within our operational firefighters and also in respect of other roles. That's presented both opportunities during the restructure, but has also presented challenges in terms of our corporate capacity. The reasons for staff leaving are multifactorial. It include changes to the firefighter pension regulations, normal retirements, but also staff seeking post-COVID changes. And I'm sure you'll be aware that this is absolutely consistent across the public sector. As with everything, it appears that normal rules no longer apply. And across the sector, we're now working really, really hard to recruit. But this landscape has been changing and it's actually becoming highly competitive. As a consequence of this, we've carried a number of vacancies throughout the year. That includes operational firefighters on both the retained and the whole-time duty systems, positions at the principal officer level, and also throughout the organisation in corporate services. These posts range from vehicle technicians, procurement lead, health and safety lead, through to HR specialists. So it's a very challenging market at the present time. These posts, though, all remain critical to our corporate capacity, and that's especially the case following the restructure and as a consequence of the reviews that we're undertaking. There are 3 main areas of focus. The retained recruitment. The new structure will support and enable more local approaches, and coupled with increased capacity within the training department, we're planning for increased numbers during 2022-23. So we're very much hopeful that the underspend that we've experienced during the last financial year won't be replicated. Similarly, within corporate services, we're progressing with the recruitment and selection processes across all of the departments. We're working proactively to build flexibility. We're looking at hybrid working, flexible hours. However, that caution is that the employment market is very unpredictable, and it's a budget that we're very, very carefully monitoring. Within whole-time firefighters, the recruitment process is now ongoing. We've held positive action days for underrepresented groups, and these have been extremely well attended. So in overall terms, for 2021, we did experience an underspend against our pay budget, but significant action has been taken to recruit during 2022-23. These payroll underspends have been partially utilised to address pressures within the non-pay budgets. In particular, we've had to take action to address the backlog of repairs and maintenance across the estate. These commenced during the year and included a range of environmental measures, including low carbon lighting, the insulation of roofs and replacement of windows and doors. So everything geared to reducing our carbon footprint. In addition to that, the costs around our buildings was also offset by one-off income relating to national non-domestic rate refunds. We submitted a challenge to one of the valuations and that was successful. But more generally, this is a really difficult area of activity, both to delays arising from our contractor capacity, but also those inflationary pressures within the supply chain. And there'll be pressures that you'll all be familiar with, both in your local authorities, but also more widely in your personal lives. The gas and electricity costs were relatively stable during 2021-22, and this is due to the fixed tariff that we have. However, the contract is due to be renewed during 2022-23, and it's an area that we're going to have to carefully manage. The use of IT has also increased both this year and last year, and we have achieved significant connectivity benefits by moving to M365. That enables our staff to work remotely and also to participate in meetings in the way that we're doing today. All of our staff now have email addresses, which again aids our communication. Significant efforts have also been made in respect of our cyber resilience, and that work is ongoing. Coupled with costs associated with the update of our control room systems, this has been an area that we've had to carefully manage throughout the year. Members will note from the report that we're also able and assisted by the Welsh Government in a number of areas of grant funding. So grant funding this year amounted to 2.5 million. The main elements relate to support for the firefighter pension contributions, the Firelink grant, which relates to our emergency service network, upgrades to our control room ICT infrastructure. Members will also note, and again, this is really relevant to the session that we've had in respect of our wildfires, that we receive support from the Welsh Government for initiatives around the prevention. And these include arson reduction, home safety, and youth engagement. And these are areas that we really do value the support that we receive from the Welsh Government. In addition to the Welsh Government grant income, we do receive a small element of income. And this is higher than expected this year or anticipated due to sales of obsolete assets and also income from masts which are located on service property. However, it's also been necessary to write off a very small number of bad debts, which totaled £748. In total, there were 6. And for those 6 cases, we identified that the recovery had been exhausted and it was no longer cost effective to further progress these. So a relatively small amount. Turning to the capital plan has probably been our most challenging area this year. The original plan was for 3 million, and that was revised in years due to delays of delivery of projects. The year-end outturn is 1.2 million, which relates to the initial payments on new fire appliances and the purchase of new vehicles for our mechanics as part of our service modernisation. The fleet slippage relates to the delivery date for the new appliances, and this is now anticipated early in 2022-23. And I think that is very, very much reflective of the capacity within the supply chains. The capital programme has been funded both through borrowing and also through using one of our earmarked reserves. Members will also note that there's an item in our revenue which relates to the in-year cost of capital financing, and this is 2.3 million. What that actually relates to is the interest charge associated with our borrowing and also a charge to revenue in respect of the depreciation of the assets. So this is an area where we do monitor to ensure that actually the debt portfolio remains very much manageable given the variation and fluctuation in interest rates. So a really good example where we'll make a decision today, but it has a long-term consequence for the future. I've mentioned on a couple of occasions earmarked reserves, and for the benefit of new members, It's worth noting that the authority is permitted to establish reserves, and these can either be earmarked for a specific purpose or held in a general reserve. The financial reserve strategy was approved by members in 2021. The last 2 financial years have been exceptional due to COVID restrictions, the supply chain difficulties, and also the number of vacancies that the authority has been carrying. What that has enabled us to do is to build up those reserves, which will provide a financial buffer and security in a number of key areas. The facilities improvement work, we've got a reserve of 1.3 million, and this will enable us not only to upgrade our buildings where necessary to ensure that they remain fit for purpose, but also look at that the environmental footprint of our buildings. Training is key to everything that we do, and we've established a reserve of £250,000. That ensures that for those new recruits coming through, we've got the capacity in the system to deliver the training that they need. And then for our existing staff, that we can look at that training provision, especially in respect of new areas or new pieces of legislation. The inflation pressures at the present time can't be underestimated. It isn't just for us in respect of gas, electricity, or indeed the cost of fuel. It's in every aspect of what we do. We've established an earmarked reserve of 0.25 million, and that very much is to address any unforeseen inflation pressures that can't be managed in year. The Emergency Service Network is the national communications network across emergency services. The old system is due for replacement, but the capital cost of the new system is not yet fully known. So again, to ensure that we've got that capacity, we've established a reserve over a number of years, which now stands at £750,000. I touched very briefly in respect of our borrowing. We have an interest reserve of 0.3 million, and that again just ensures that where there are increases in interest rates or indeed spikes, that we can manage that without the need to go back to our constituent local authorities. We've spoken today about the need for kit. PPE, really important, the uniforms that our staff wear. And again, we have a provision within our earmarked reserves of £250,000 for that. And then the last earmarked reserve that I would like to mention is our transformational change. That's standing at just under 900,000. We've spoken about the RDS review, the wildfire review, and also our training review. And the earmarked reserves allows us to move forward with that change, again, without going back to our constituent local authorities in year. Within the accounts, a full schedule of the earmarked reserves are detailed on page 36, which confirm that our reserves are currently 5.7 million. What I'd like to do now is turn to the balance sheet. The balance sheet provides further insight into the overall financial strength of the authority. And I would like to cover the key elements. Our fixed assets relates to expenditure over £5,000, which give rise to something that will be used for a period in excess of 12 months. The obvious ones that people are very familiar with would include land and property, buildings, vehicles, but it also might relate to infrastructure assets such as our ICT. The value of our assets as at the 31st of March is £39 million, against which we have borrowing of 24.4. The main element relates to London buildings, and these are formally revalued every 5 years. The last formal valuation was undertaken for 2020-21, but due to the current market conditions, there is significant uncertainty. Worth noting that the valuation basis is different to normal property and is generally included at what's known as depreciated replacement costs. And that means that the current inflationary pressures also impact on our buildings. Just to ensure that our accounts are as complete and comprehensive as they might be, we've asked our valuers to undertake a desk-based review to provide our auditors with assurance that there isn't a material change. If there is, then it will be necessary to make an adjustment to the accounts to reflect this. I touched on the borrowing. The authority is only permitted to borrow for capital purposes. But you will appreciate that this is an area that requires deep consideration, very much due to the long-term commitment and the uncertainties that we experience. The Prudential Code has been issued by SIPFA, and that provides a mechanism for ensuring that the risks and benefits of capital expenditure and borrowing are carefully managed and controlled. Members will be pleased to note that a more detailed report will be submitted to the next audit committee, but I would like to draw your attention to the prudential indicators contained within the update report. These confirm that the authority achieved its prudential indicators during the year, which essentially means that our borrowing did not approve the amounts that have been approved by members. Sorry, it did not exceed. You will also note when you look at the balance sheet that there is a significant liability in respect of our pension funds. This is an estimate of the liabilities at the balance sheet date. All of our employees are eligible to join a pension scheme, and we have two different schemes that are relevant to our staff. The first one is our firefighters pension scheme that our operational staff can join, and the second one is the local government pension scheme for all of the staff. The firefighters pension scheme is unfunded, which means that there are no underlying investments. The receipts from staff in year and also from the employer are used to fund those existing pensions in payment. And we also receive cash funding from the Welsh Government on an annual basis to support this. For the local government pension scheme, we're part of the Clwyd Pension Fund, and this scheme carries investments. The liabilities reflect the actuarial assessment of the money that would be required to fulfil the authority's accrued obligations if the fund was to close at the balance sheet date. And you will appreciate that this is a significant amount. The authority is the scheme manager for the Firefighters Fund, and we've spoken about that today. You will therefore be ably assisted in that respect by both the local pension board and also a national scheme advisory board for Wales. And I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail when I get to the local pension board item. So that was very much a whistle-stop tour through our accounts. And I'm happy to pass over to David Edwards, who I think is going to say a few words also.
Diolch, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. Helen has had a very challenging piece this morning, following on from Stuart with his helicopters and wildfires. So I'm hoping that you're still with us. That was a very comprehensive presentation of the accounts. These are a very tidy set of accounts, I must say. And in the main accounts, in the packs that you've received separately to the agenda, but in the same email, on page 16, you will see the first main statement of income and expenditure, talking about the cost of the services at 40 million. Usually, with that's skewed to some extent, as with every other organisation, with the pension figures that are received later. So 20 million pushing the figures the other way. But you'll say that there are swings every year with that, and there's no reason to be concerned. The pension benefits are payable over a very long period of time, and these are just paper figures. The changes happened to the actuarial change to the discount rate. I'll discuss that with any anorex amongst you if you wish. But as I said, these are a very tidy set of accounts. Audit Wales will be looking at these now. They've already said that they will be looking in detail into the value of assets, the infrastructure assets. And the Fire Rescue Authority will be no different in that. And Audit Wales will address that when they report back to us around September time. At that time, the authority will publish its post-audit version of the accounts. I don't expect that there'll be any significant changes to the version that you've got in front of you this morning. I'd like to thank both Helens on the call this morning, Helen MacArthur and Helen Howard in today's meeting. Thank you to them and the finance team for their heroic work. It was a major challenge to get the accounts closed for 2021-22. In a normal year, it would have been a challenge, but with COVID and changing IT systems and not everything else, I can only highly thank the team. They have produced the financial statements in front of you, and it's my pleasure to approve them to you. I continuing to check the Welsh. Some of the most might have spotted on the page 13 of the accounts, it talks about increase in a couple of places where it says a reduction in English. So we will make sure that we correct minor little things like that prior to the audits. But for today, as your statutory finance officer, I have already signed the statements, and there are recommendations in part 6 on page 10 and 11 asking you please to note the situation expressed in the statements and to delegate this to the executive panel to approve the final version. Thirdly, to approve the reserves, which are listed on page 16 and 17. In my opinion, they're at an adequate level and provide us with strength moving forward. And finally, to note the bad debts that have been written off with the details on page 17. Thank you, David.
Finance team need to be congratulated on having completed the accounts within the required timescales. Thank you, Helen, for that very comprehensive report. And can I also thank you, Helen, for the your input on the induction training that we had on Thursday when you gave an overview of the budget, which I know that members found very helpful. So thank you for that also. So do members have any comments or questions in relation to the report, please? If not, you've just heard the Treasurer outline the recommendations, the 4 recommendations. Can I have somebody to move, propose? Councillor Rob Triggs, are you proposing? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I pressed the wrong, but I just had a little question. So I've been called frugal and tight in the past, so I'm interested in the debts that were written off, £700 odd. I just wondered what kind of thing that would be.
I wish that local authorities wrote off such small debts, but I'll pass that over to Helen, is it?
Yeah, thank you very much. There were 6 in total. Some of them related to the hire of rural community, and there were a couple of very small staff debts, people who've left, perhaps over for uniform, but we don't for whatever reason have a forwarding address. So thankfully very small in nature, and please be assured that we're also very, very cautious, and every effort has been made. It was just on this occasion that without going into formal action, and even in that occasion, it would have been very difficult to have sort of collected the debt. So definitely something we keep an eye on.
Okay, thank you very much.
If there are no more questions or comments, can I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations then, please? Councillor Nigel Smith, I think, proposing. Councillor Ken Taylor seconding. Will all members show that they approve the recommendations, please? Diolch yn fawr, thank you. So going on now to the next item, which is the item 8, which is the annual governance statement. And can I invite Assistant Chief Officer Sian Morris to present that report, please? Diolch yn fawr, Sian.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd, a bore da.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Lovely to see you. This report presents the draft governance statement for the Fire Rescue Authority for the year that's just gone back, the past financial year. This statement goes hand in hand with the accounts, and this is also a statutory document that is assessed by the external auditor. In an usual year, this draft would have gone to the executive panel before now, but of course, due to the election, we haven't had an opportunity to do it until now for the Fire Authority to see and approve the draft statement. It is required of you to prepare and publish this type of statement annually in order to make an assessment and show that the corporate governance system in place for the Fire Authority is effective and sufficient. So if I can refer you to the first page of the appendix, which is titled Framework for Good Governance, which comes straight after the contents page, and refer you to the 3 bullet points at the top of the page. Those explain the purpose of the assessment. The reason why we do this is to show that the business is undertaken in accordance with relevant legislation and regulations, that public funding is safeguarded, and that resources are used in a responsible manner. And I'm sure that we all share those responsibilities, whether we're in the service or in the authority. Then you will see further down the page that the assessment itself is undertaken against 7 core elements, which are in the colourful boxes at the bottom. If you go on to page 4 of the appendix, the summary of the governance framework lists those core principles in slightly more detail. And this, more or less, is the model for the authority with good governance, that, you know, being open, defining outcomes, working with integrity. So that is what we aim to be as an authority. Then you've got the evidence about how we measure whether we're doing this is on pages 5 to 11. I won't go through it in detail, but there's a great deal of evidence in there. I think they're self-explanatory, but you are welcome to ask for any clarification at the end if you wish, and I will do my best to answer. If I can then refer you to page 12, to the table on page 12, if we just look at what's been achieved last year, just very briefly, if I can just run through those. In the table, the first improvement step is to review the financial regulation. That's been completed. Working to protect ourselves from cyber attack, a great deal of work has been done on that, but unfortunately that work never ends. It's a constant threat to us as an authority, so that will be carried forward. Creating a new environmental strategy. That work hasn't progressed as much as we'd hoped for a number of good reasons. Therefore, that one will be carried forward to this year. Responding to an independent investigation following the Grenfell tragedy, we have completed the action from phase 1 and are now waiting for phase 2 findings, so that work will continue. Going over to page 14, the recommendations for improvements following on from what we learned from the pandemic, that has been completed. And finally, the one regarding pensions, that's still ongoing and is being monitored by the local pension board. Moving forward on very quickly, just to finish, the improvement plan for this year, which will be of more interest to you, especially as new members. You will see there in the table on page 15, cyber security, which is carried over, as I said. That never ends, never stops, unfortunately. Then we have 3 action steps following on from the restructure of the service, which you have already heard about. 3 things that we want to look at specifically this year, which is to ensure that the planning cycles for corporate and financial sides are still working together as an integrated system. So making sure that things haven't changed with regards to that. To trial an assurance framework, we've had to create groups and new committees following on from the restructure. So therefore, we want to make sure that the monitoring and the decision making happens in a way that leads up to the leadership team, so that that still works efficiently. And then thirdly, to include more people in the process of assessing the authority. As we prepare this governance statement, we feel that we need to include more people as we're working on this, and you as members, obviously. Next is the environmental strategy. That again is being carried over. Some of you may be aware that Welsh Government has set a target for the public sector to be carbon neutral by the year 2030. So there's a great deal of work. You will be working on that strategy with us over this forthcoming year. Internal audits, there's a report on today's agenda. It's just a matter of good practice to review the contract for internal audit services from time to time. So that's what that one is. Developing you as members. We haven't got a training program set out at the moment. So the intention is to create a 5-year program for members to help you in your role as members of the Fire Authority. And finally, the Constitution. This is reviewed and amended on a regular basis. So we acknowledge, and we've realised this year, that we need to include more about the arrangements about that period before a local authority election up until the meeting today. There's an interregnum is the Latin name in it. So there's that period where we need to delegate powers on a temporary basis. So the recommendations, Mr. Chairman, are set out in paragraph 5. If anybody's got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, over to you for the recommendations. Thank you. Thank you, Sian, for your report.
Please. I can't see any hands being raised. So as Sian has pointed out, the recommendations are at paragraph 5. There's 3 parts to the recommendations. I'll just read them. They're very brief. Note the governance arrangements outlined within the draft 2021-22 annual governance statement. Note the forward work plan for 2022-23 and approve the draft 2021-22 annual government statement. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Austin Roberts, I think, was first out of the blocks, then Councillor Brian Apsley, I'll take as a seconder. Will you all show that you approve the recommendations, please? Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. So the next item is back to Helen for the Firefighters Pension Scheme Local Pension Board Annual Report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and members will be delighted to know that this is a much shorter item on the agenda than the Statement of Accounts. We've spoken this morning both in respect of the elections, but also in relation to the accounts around pensions. And we have a local pension board, and that local pension board on an annual basis produces an annual report. The purpose of the report is to look backwards, saying this is what we plan to do, this is what we've actually done, but it also looks forward as well in terms of future priorities. Before I jump into that report, I thought it might be helpful to provide yourselves as members with a little bit of background to provide some context. I spoke in relation to the statement of accounts that we have two schemes. We have the firefighters pension scheme and the local government pension scheme. As the local government pension scheme is managed by Clwyd Pension Fund on our behalf, that acts as a scheme manager. But the firefighters scheme is unfunded, and the authority, i.e. yourselves, assumes that responsibility of the scheme manager. So clearly this will be a really extremely difficult task for you as individual members to undertake, and the day-to-day responsibility is delegated to the Chief Fire Officer. However, it is a very, very sensitive area, and to support yourselves as a scheme manager, the local pension board exists. And that's very much around understanding the key pieces of legislation, making sure that we comply with the pensions regulator, and also ensuring that our administrators are doing the job that they should be. There's been a huge amount of change in the public sector over the last decade, and the Pensions Bill in 2013 further strengthened these governance arrangements. And that is where the need for a local pension board is established. As we've spoken about today, the local pension board is made up both of employer representatives, that is the clerk, the treasurer and elected members, but also employee representatives. And that's just to ensure that there's an equal balance of focus. So looking at it through the lens of both the employer and also the employee. It's fair to say, and really important to note, that the local pension board doesn't have decision-making powers, but does act to support the authority to discharge its responsibility. The terms of reference for the group are based on the requirements set out in the Public Pensions Act. These are reviewed annually, and they've also been reviewed on an all Wales basis just to ensure that they contain all of the requisite elements. I've also referenced the Scheme Advisory Board for Wales, and this is a broader group which includes representation from all three fire authorities, as well as the Welsh Government. Also includes employee representatives at a national level. So again, for the firefighters pension scheme, that includes all of the main unions. So the reports in the pack today consist of two things. It's the annual report for 2021-22 and also the terms of reference. The annual report confirms the membership for the year and confirms that it was an equal split between employer and employee. That doesn't mean to say that at each meeting there's an equal split, but it just means in terms of that constitution. What's really, really important is that every effort is made to attend meetings to ensure there is that balance in the discussion. The local pension board meets on 4 occasions each year, and that's absolutely consistent with the recommendations of the pension regulator and follows good practice. The chair rotates between the employee and the employer representatives, and certainly since I've joined the organisation, I think I've seen 3 chairs, and the current chair is ACFO Fairhead as an employee. I think Councillor Apsley also was the chair for a period of a couple of years. To aid members, we always provide training. So when you join the pension board, you are required to work through the pensions regulator modules, and that's to give you an understanding what a pension's about, what's the regulatory framework, what are the key elements, and ensure that you're supported in discharging your responsibility. In addition to that, we include standard items on the agenda, which includes an overview from the pensions lead within the service. So very much that's around how many members have we got, how many people have opted out, have we had any complaints, are there any big things that we're working through. It also includes a report from the services administrators, and you've heard today that that's Carmarthenshire, also known as the Dyfed Pension Fund, and they do the day-to-day activities on our behalf. So as a retired member, you are paid, your paperwork is sat with Dyfed. But of course, although they do that on our behalf, we still hold that responsibility. So again, that local pension board is a really good forum where we receive reports and we put the challenge in. And that also involves having that confirmation that any technical updates issued by the Welsh Government have been actioned. So it's a really good arena where we just make sure that we're doing that forward look and ensuring that any problems are identified on an early basis. The board also discusses key issues which include any legal challenges. I think it's fair to say that the pension scheme has had its fair share of legal challenges nationally, I'd like to say, very much national in nature and relate to such matters as age discrimination in public sector pension schemes, the challenge arising from implementation of pensions for part-time workers, and also a challenge around which elements of pay are pensionable. So highly technical and complex in nature, which is why we do provide that support for the members of the board with that training. I think it's fair to say that our focus for 2022 will be to support new members into their roles and also to maintain the oversight on key issues, which will involve those legal challenges. I'm happy to take any questions or queries the members may have, either in respect of the report or indeed the terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for that very helpful overview of the work of the board and presenting the report. Are there any questions for Helen? I can't see any hands being raised. So the one recommendation, which is quite straightforward at paragraph 3, is members approve the Local Pension Board Annual Report 2021-22 for publication on the authority's website. Councillor Brian Apsley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that report, please.
Thank you very much. And I presume Councillor Nigel Smith, are you seconding that?
Happy to second Brian's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Will you members show, please, that they approve the recommendation? Excellent. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. So the next item is the Internal Audit Annual Report for 2021-22, and I've got Mr. Keith Williams as the Audit Manager to present the reports.
Yes, good morning. I'm Keith Williams, Audit Manager at Conway County Borough Council, and I'm submitting the report on behalf of the Head of Internal Audit at Conway. The Internal Audit Annual Report for 21-22 is submitted under the terms of the Accounts and Audit Wales Regulations 2014, whereby the Fire and Rescue Authority is required annually to conduct a review of the effectiveness of its system of internal control. And obviously internal audit is an integral part of that system and is a significant contributor to the preparation of the annual governance statement, which you've just received. The public sector internal audit standards require the head of internal audit to provide the audit committee with an independent and objective assurance on the whole system of internal control, including the adequacy of risk management and the corporate governance arrangements. This report before you analyses the work of the Internal Audit Service for the year and contains the internal audit opinion and the assurance statement for 21-22. Just for information, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a service level agreement between Conway and the authority, whereby Conway provide 50 days of internal audit work per annum. There was 50 days allocated to this year, 52 days allocated, 50 days plus 2 days carried forward from 2021. This report identifies that 44 days of internal audit work was performed in the year. And as a result, and in agreement with management, 8 days were carried forward into 22-23, which will be more than useful this year due to the fact that financial services, which have been managed by Conway since 1996, are now in-house with the service, and a number of jobs are planned for this year on the main financial systems, which includes payroll, creditors and stores. The audit reviews provide a positive level of assurance upon the adequacy of the systems of internal control in place, although 8 recommendations have been made in the year to address some of the weaknesses. A formal follow-up process is in place to ensure that any recommendations are implemented within the timescales established within the action plans. The work of internal audit has not identified any weaknesses that would qualify this opinion, and then no significant issues that are relevant to the preparation of the annual governance statements. This report also provides some assurance that the internal audit service at Conway operates in accordance with the public sector internal audit standards to enable the authority to take assurance from this opinion. A summary of the work supporting the audit opinion is contained within Appendix A. So if I could take you there initially. So Appendix A is a summary of the key messages and recommendations from the year. You'll see there that at the top we make recommendations which are either critical, major, moderate or minor. This is assessed using Conway's risk assessment matrix. We also provide an audit opinion on each audit, which is dependent upon the number of recommendations and obviously their category. So we provide audit opinions which are either high assurance, satisfactory, limited or no assurance. You'll see the first audit there that was undertaken was the emergency fire appliance driving. The scope of the audit is included in the schedule, as are the 8 recommendations which were made. Obviously, management responded to all these recommendations with proposed actions, and a follow-up will be undertaken this year to ensure that they've been implemented. The other areas of work undertaken in the year, National Fraud Initiative. The NFI is a comprehensive and thorough data matching exercise organised by the Cabinet Office in partnership with Audit Wales, with an objective to detect and prevent payment errors and fraud being perpetrated against local authorities, NHS, police and fire authorities. The exercise identified 313 data matches, and the type of data match is included in the schedule. As I've said, there was actually 313 there, which were examined in relation to their priority. The results of the exercise provided a high level of assurance that payroll and creditors systems are well controlled, which effectively reduces the risk of fraud and irregularity. In accordance with public sector internal audit standards, part of our role is also to undertake special investigations. And a special investigation was undertaken in the year with regards to cybercrime. There was an attempted creditor fraud by the use of scam phishing emails, with the aim of getting the service to make a payment legitimately due to a local plumber to a fraudulent bank account. The plumbing company's emails and or computer were compromised and emails intercepted on delivery. Conway's internal control procedures were complied with and the attempted fraud was prevented. A number of actions were recommended to the plumbing company, obviously to enhance their email security, and the fraud was reported to Action Fraud, the UK's National Reporting Centre for Fraud and Cybercrime. We also undertook 2 follow-up audits in the year, which are contained within Appendix B. You'll see there we undertook a follow-up of payroll starters and leavers. The original audit opinion was satisfactory and made 3 recommendations. 1 recommendation was implemented in relation to overpayment invoices. Just like to confirm that the overpayments within payroll are very rare. Obviously, the internal controls are in place, so it's not a big issue, and the invoices are now being raised promptly. There was a couple of recommendations that were work in progress. They were in relation to the approval of the recruitment and selection policy and the processes involved with checking references and qualifications. And as you can see from the schedule there, the revised audit opinion was high. The other follow-up that we undertook was safe and well checks. So the audit was initially undertaken in February 21 and made 11 recommendations. The follow-up in March this year confirmed that 2 had been implemented, 4 were currently work in progress, and 5 of the recommendations were no longer applicable. This was due to the fact that safe and well checks are no longer being delivered by partner agencies as they were in the past. Of course, up to about 60 partner agencies are still referring vulnerable households for safe and well checks. Appendix C provides a summary of the internal audit activity for the year. As I previously mentioned, payroll and central stores were actually undertaken and they were delayed to this year, 22-23, due to the fact that financial services have come back in-house in April 22. So financial systems work have been planned for this year. NFI work took 9 days. Training and development, emergency fire appliance driving took 16.5. Special investigation, 4 days. The audit follow-ups required a significant amount of retesting, so they took 8.5 days. Planning, reporting and consultancy work took 6 days. And as I mentioned, that comes there to 44, which resulted in 8 days being carried forward into this year, which will be very useful. If I can now take you to the internal audit opinion, which is in paragraphs 14 to 18 of the report. And the head of audit is satisfied that the internal audit work undertaken in the year, together with our maintained knowledge of the organisation and its procedures, allow a reasonable conclusion as to the adequacy and effectiveness of the authority's risk management, control and governance processes. It's the head of audit's opinion that the authority has adequate and effective control processes to manage its achievement of the authority's objectives for the year to the 31st of March 2022. This overall audit opinion has been used in the preparation of the annual governance statement. In relation to the recommendation, that is in paragraph 9, and that is that the committee should note the contents of the head of audit and procurement's annual report and the overall opinion upon the adequacy and effectiveness of the authority's framework for governance, risk management and control. That's the annual report for the year, and I'll happily answer any questions that they may be.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for presenting that report, and I'm sure members would agree that it's reassuring to hear the contents of that report. And I noticed that when you referred to the recommendations, that none of the recommendations related to areas that were of a critical or major nature. And certainly it seems to me that the report is a very positive one. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Williams from members, please? No, I can't see anything at all. So as Mr. Williams pointed out, the recommendation in paragraph 9 is simply to note the report. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Gwynfor Owens' hand went up to propose, followed by Councillor Nigel Smith, who was the next hand I saw to second. Will members show that they approve the recommendation? Diolch yn fawr, thank you. And then the next item is item 11, the audit plan for 2022 from Audit Wales, and Helen MacArthur's down to present this, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a very, very short item for noting by the members. Colleagues from Audit Wales are on the call today, and I'm happy for them to come in and say anything. But essentially, this is information about the forward look in 2022-23, and confirmation that the estimated audit fee for this work is just under £64,000. That work will have 2 strands to it, one of which is the traditional financial audit. That work is already commenced, and then it will also have the performance audit, and the specific detail of that hasn't yet been finalised and is currently in discussion. So very much a report for note, and I'm happy to either take any queries or indeed invite Mike Whiteley to say additional words if there's any need to do so.
Yes, could I invite Mr. Mike Whiteley perhaps to introduce himself and say anything that he wants to say? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, and thank you, Helen, for the introduction there. I won't propose to go through the report in any detail. I'll take it as read. Just one area to update on. The Exhibit 2, which is on page 9 of our report, we've got value for money review, thematic review, further details to follow. I spoke to my colleague Nick Selwyn this morning, who deals with that work, and I understand that area of work is to be agreed as reducing and preventing fire false alarms. So that's one update to our report there, Chair. Happy to take any questions on any other areas of the report or any of the risks identified in the plan.
Thank you very much, Mike. Are there any questions, any comments from members? No, in that case, it's just a case of the recommendation once again of note in the report. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please? And Councillor Nigel Smith, I think, is proposing. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Mark Young, thank you very much. Seconded. Will members just indicate that they support the recommendation noted in the report? Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. Takes us to item 12, which is urgent matters. There aren't any urgent matters. There isn't anything under part 2. That brings us to the end of this morning's proceedings. Can I thank everyone for their attendance and for their involvement this morning? It's been a long meeting, but I'm sure you agree, a very productive one. Diolch yn fawr iawn, pawb. Thank you, everybody.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr. Hwyl.